Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. We're just getting ready for a 10 o'clock start. We're just going to wait for a few more attendees and then we'll kick off at 10. Okay, I think we'll make a start. Anyone can continue joining, but over to you, James.
Thanks, Matt. So yeah, thank you all for joining our Risk Academy this year. This is the Motor Fleet Risk Management Academy 2025, and it's going to be on collision reporting and investigation. I'm James Phillips. I'm a risk engineer here at Protector. I've been here around 2 years, focusing primarily on the motor side of things, and I'm joined with my colleague Matt. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. Good to see quite a lot of you on the call today. So I'm Matt Kiernan, risk engineer here at Protector. I dabble in all lines of business, but happy to have you on the call today and take you through collision reporting and investigation.
Thanks, Matt. So first things first, I'm not sure how much you've seen of Protector presentations, but we always start with our DNA. I'm just going to pull out some of bits of our DNA that we think is prevalent to this presentation. The first one being best-in-class decision making. I think just utilizing an in-depth collision investigation process and just having that good understanding of your root causes can just allow you to make those best decisions of where resources can be allocated to make those best improvements. And then also I've circled committed in our values, as well with kind of all elements of risk management. The policies and procedures in place can only really affect change if everyone involved shows good buy-in and remains committed to achieve that common goal. I'll leave you to Matt to go through the kind of module guidelines for this presentation.
Okay, so just a bit of housekeeping before we kick off. So first, the most important thing is we're going to be using Slido as a poll and engagement tool today. So what we recommend you do now is to log in at slido.com as I'm speaking right now and just type in the code that's on the screen. So it's 2011-581. So if you could all do that now, it's probably worth doing now because we've got 5 or 6 polls throughout the presentation, just to stop you having to listen to me and James for 60 to 90 minutes. Stop you getting bored. I believe the session is already being recorded. We've got a chat function and a Q&A, which we'll try and go through at the end if we've got time. But what we want most of all is you guys to enjoy yourself and try and get engaged with the Slidos where you can. So I'll just leave the slide up for a couple more seconds. So just on your browser or your mobile phone, just go to slido.com and then type in the number on the screen. When we get to the first poll, we'll have it up on screen there as well. Okay.
Just seeing that our colleagues George and David are in the call. So if one of you could put the code in the chat for us, we would appreciate that.
I could probably do that for you, actually.
Oh, cheers, Matt.
I don't.
Nice. Right. So the agenda. So with the way that we kind of discuss fleet risk management here at Protector is that we split it up into the 4 pillars of fleet risk management. Starting off with leadership, we'll go through the business case for a road traffic collision process. We'll go through the GDE matrix and look at KPIs to help track improvement and measure changes. The next pillar is the driver, looking at the FNOL. We'll look at the 6 stages of collision and driver collision factors. Next pillar 3, we have the vehicle, what to investigate, vehicle data, best practices when investigating your vehicles. Then fourth pillar would be on the journey. For this topic, there'll be about collision, type of collision, environmental factors, obtaining information. And then we've added, specifically for this presentation, the investigation. Summarize everything discussed, delve in the best ways to conduct these post-collision investigations. So starting with the business case, understanding why incidents may occur and take place and putting in measures to stop them, not only ensures like the employees' well-being, but also ensures the safety of all road users, reduces injuries across the board. Looking on the financial side, it reduces fleet costs such as like vehicle driver downtime, collisional damage, fleet consumables, and obviously the big one, insurance premiums. And then also reputationally, having a lot of incidents affect your reputation with different authorities, professional bodies, police, and even can affect something like your brand image. Everyone has a mobile phone these days. The last thing you want is a viral TikTok video of one of your vehicles with a lot of branding along the side of it, on the side of a road, getting made fun of by some TikToks. This slide, I'll talk about the overlap of the Health and Safety of Work Act and the Road Traffic Act. So as you guys are probably familiar with, the Health and Safety at Work deals with the responsibilities of employers to enforce safety on work sites. And in recent years, there's been a high emphasis on driving for work as an at-work activity. Sections 2 and 3 require that systems of work need to be in place and need to reduce work-related risks as much as reasonably practicable. And for the motor fleet side of things, a collision reporting and investigation process is the fundamental layer for these policies and procedures. And so the main difference when driving at work to other at-work activities are that the vehicles are also bound to the road traffic law enforced by the police. But now there are some occasions where the HSE will get involved, particularly when the police have suspected that there might be any management failures as part of the root causes of an incident. And so the HSE and the police can then conduct joint investigation and prosecute under the health and safety law if they feel necessary. And then just wanted to highlight this new legislation. It's been around now 3 years. Still not very hot on a lot of people's radar. It's a new legislation called Causing Serious Injury by Careless Driving. So I'll start off with the scenario at the top of the box there. Driver A rear ends another vehicle after momentarily looking away from the road. The driver of the other vehicle suffers a serious injury, such as maybe a broken hip. So before 2022, before this legislation was in place, there was 2 options for prosecution. There was dangerous driving, which is a high threshold, potentially a lot of prison time, or careless driving, which is that low-level penalty, giving out fines and points. But now, say that scenario happens again, there's a legislation that bridges that gap. So this is causing serious injury by careless driving, which can lead up to 2 years of imprisonment, mandatory 12-month driving ban, but there's no financial penalty. So the impact on at-work drivers is increased risk. Custodial sentence can obviously lead to a lot of significant disruption for the driver and the employer. Potential liability, the company could face legal and financial consequences. So the key change is like stricter penalty for serious injury caused by careless driving, especially if you're driving for work. And it's almost as if careless driving is now no longer seen as an accident, but almost an active choice by the driver to not have their full attention while driving on the road. So there's more onus on the driver and the employer to ensure that whoever is in control of that vehicle needs to be in the correct frame of mind to drive. So I'll hand over to Matt for our first Slido.
Okay, great. Thanks, James. So a quick poll just to start us off, just to make sure that everyone's paying attention and everyone's logged into Slido. So if you've logged into Slido, we've got the link in the chat, we've got the code in the chat. The question is, choose one of the 5 examples on the Slido screen, which is causing injury by careless driving, based on the types of actions that would typically fall under careless driving. So we've defined careless driving as driving that falls below what would be expected of a competent and careful driver. So just pick which one of the 5 examples most applies under careless driving to you. So because it's the first poll, we'll just give you a minute to have a think and log on. But we started getting a couple of answers already, which is great. So I'll give you a couple of seconds. If anyone's struggling to log on, just send a message in the chat and hopefully we can help you out. But it looks like we've got a front runner already and just over 40 respondents. So I'll just wait to see it creep up to 50 or so. Okay, so great. Thanks for getting involved, most of you. So as I say, we've got more polls coming, so it's still worth logging on to Slido, and there's still time to get involved later in the presentation. So the whole point of this poll is it's almost a trick question, because all of the examples could be considered to fall under careless driving. The only one that we think may be an exception to this rule is the one that the majority of you have chosen, so the driver texting or using his mobile phone. So the reason for this is because it's subject to its own law since 2022. So you could argue it's its own separate issue, so they can be prosecuted for using a mobile phone rather than careless driving. But indeed, it is a cause of careless driving itself. So we've also got the second most selected option was following too closely behind another vehicle, which doesn't leave a safe stopping distance and then therefore results in a rear end vehicle shunt, and also failing to stop at a red light. So these are all classic examples of careless driving. So the point we want to emphasize here is that when drivers step behind the wheel, we want to make sure that they're honest with themselves, that they're in the correct frame of mind to be driving, because in the worst case, as James has said in the previous slide, we could see up to 2 years in prison for a committed offence for one of these examples.
So that brings us to the first pillar, which is leadership. And we'll go through kind of the stages of collision reporting and investigation process. As we kind of aware, vast majority of collisions are very preventable. We don't like to see them, but it's that lapse of concentration. It's that minor error of judgment and a collision happens. And that leads to large cumulative costs, increased insurance premiums and higher hidden costs, which we'll go through in another slide. And just to emphasize the point, a well thought out collision reduction strategy helps prevent future collisions when properly utilized. And to kind of start off with that, we start on the left. The first thing to do is to establish a baseline data, know how the vehicles are performing at this moment in time. So it's easy to document improvements when you do your initiatives, when these take place. Conduct root cause analysis to identify trends and where best to allocate resources, identify the type of incident, where they are, how severe it is, the costs of all of that. Review, then next to the middle box, review your current procedures and processes in place. Is it enough to capture the relevant information to identify effective actions? Then the next one, we have consult with the drivers, find out where they believe improvements can be made. There's always increased engagement with the drivers when they're involved in the conversations, and there's more, and then they'll show more buy-in and commitment if they feel like they can help affect the change. And then finally, developing KPIs, linking back to kind of that first box on the left. Develop the KPIs, track your progress to help you achieve that continual improvement. So the next slide is the GDE matrix, a bit of a complicated slide, so I'll try and get through this slowly. It's the goals of driver education, and it was conducted via a survey sent out to drivers to identify the different areas that they believed there was a lack of training / awareness, and the incidences were attributed to 5 different levels. To kind of give a bit more context, it might be a common response to an incident to give a driver training. However, this matrix should help you identify that this might be short-sighted and there are other avenues to explore. So, for example, well, I'll go to the example at the end. So level 1, we have vehicle control. So this is the ability of the driver to control that vehicle. Risk increasing factors such as their actual skill, the speed that they're going at, and the road conditions, and to self-evaluate how to improve on that is just improve the driver's skill. Level 2, traffic situation. So this is just the road traffic law, understanding the rules and procedures of the road. Factors increasing that risk is a lack of awareness from the driver of these rules and procedures violations, and to improve that is just improve your driving style and be a bit self-critical about how you are driving yourself. Then we have the context of the trip. So this is around route choice, potential peer pressures if you're driving with someone else, obligations. So this is more human factors and the driving environment. And to improve that, that's more about like the driver's planning and their own self-awareness of how they're driving. Life and living. This is about the lifestyles and the motives and the values of the driver behind the wheel. So this could be the factors increasing that risk could be their attitude. Are they sensation seeking? Do they like high speeds? This could also involve elements of alcohol and drugs, and that's all about impulse control and risk awareness. And then finally, the last level is an organizational level. So the logistics and the safety culture within an organization. Are they planning or are they reacting to things as they crop up? Again, this is like the awareness and responsibility, not from the driver's point of view, but instead from the overall hierarchy and the management side of things. So going back to my example of a common response to give training, if a driver gets into an incident, you might think, oh, just put them through driver training. But actually, if we look through a different avenue, go through the root causes, is driver training actually going to affect the most change? Should we be targeting these different levels of the GDE matrix? And I'm going to hand over to Matt to go through a little case study to try and help identify a scenario on where the GDE matrix, where in the GDE matrix would be best placed to go through. So over to you, Matt.
Great, thanks, James. So yeah, as James said, we're going to go through a case study. We're going to test your guys' understanding of the GDE matrix and how well James explained the GDE matrix to us all just then, because it is a fairly complex topic. So what I'll do now is run through the case study. So say we have a driver, his name's John. He's working as a driver, but he's been doing extra shifts in the warehouse lately because there's been staff shortages. Therefore, he's been feeling tired today. So when he got behind the wheel to undertake his usual delivery route, he's more tired than usual. At around lunchtime, when he's driving to make his 6th drop of the day, he needed to reverse into the loading bay at the customer premises, but he didn't check properly and he reversed into a truck that was just about to exit the loading bay. Luckily, the impact wasn't severe and nobody was hurt, but it could have been much worse. So for instance, if there was a vulnerable road user or a pedestrian on the premises, it could have resulted in a serious incident. So considering this case study, what level of the GDE matrix do we need to focus on to find a fix or solution for this issue? So level 1, vehicle control. 2, traffic situations. Level 3, the context of the trip. Level 4, life and living. Or level 5, the organizational level. So I'll just give you a minute or so. I've seen a couple of questions in the chat. I think we'll leave a couple of them for the end for the Q&A if that's okay, but I am reading them as we're going through. So we have got them. Okay, so we've got a few answers on screen now. Most of them are tailored towards level 4, life and living, and the next highest option is organizational. So barely any of you have picked levels 1, 2, and 3, which is exactly the right approach to take. So well done, James. You explained the GDE matrix well there. So I'll just give a little summary and explanation of why level 4 or level 5 is the right option. So if we start from the bottom, level 1, vehicle control, it's got nothing to do with driving a vehicle. John's been driving a vehicle for years. There's nothing to do with his control or ability to use the wheel, use the pedals, and use the brakes. It's nothing to do with that. If we move up a level to level 2, the traffic situations, yes, you may be able to argue that a vehicle was pulling out of the loading bay and that resulted in the collision. But again, it's nothing to do with vehicles on the road and how John communicates or guides his vehicle in and amongst those vehicles. Moving up to level 3, we're talking about the context of the trip. So yes, it's a day in, day out. It's a bread and butter journey for John as it's his job. So again, we can discount level 3. Where it gets interesting is level 4. So it's life and living. So it's more the human side. So if we allow for the fact that John is tired, that's a big indicator that it's life and living. But in fact, if we move up to the 5th level, the organizational level, it's here that we find the real cause of the incident, because John's working as a driver in his primary role. He's been asked to undertake shifts at the warehouse in addition to his driving role, which has resulted in him being tired. So it's not his own life and living that's made him tired. It's the organisational's responsibility to ensure he's not tired while he's undertaking his driving role. So you could say either 4 or 5, but the majority of you have selected those results anyway. So well done. Okay, we'll just move on to the next slide now, which is, well, it's a classic iceberg metaphor here. So it's understanding the costs of a collision and linking these to what's below the waterline and what are the obvious ones that are above the waterline. So above the surface of the water, it's the visible iceberg and the cost that you're most likely to think of when you think of a vehicle collision or incident. So we've got direct repair costs, the cost of the insurance claim, and then the link to that is the increase in insurance premiums the following year. Below the waterline, it's the larger section of the iceberg, so it's a larger section of the cost, but they're also hidden and more obscure. They're harder to visualize and think about. So things like rescheduling deliveries, damage to stock, if you need to hire a replacement vehicle, the vehicle downtime that you've lost while you're undertaking the repair to the vehicle in question. You may have staff absence if there's an injury, credit hire costs, and then repair to highway costs as well. So there's a number of different hidden costs below the waterline, and we've not even listed them all on screen now. So it's just to give you an idea that it's not simple, oh, I've damaged this and I'll have to pay this. It's much more extensive, and you've also got a lot of hidden costs that you may not necessarily think about. Okay, just to touch on and bring in KPIs and metrics. So we like to say if you're not measuring it, then you're probably not managing it. So we like to say that using KPIs and metrics are an essential part of managing a motor fleet. Metrics are basically your best friend. So what we use them for is monitoring performance. We can use them to identify areas of improvement. We can use them to reduce costs, and most importantly, improve safety. So all we need at a very basic level is to track the number of miles that we're driving and track the number of incidents that are taking place and the cost of these incidents as well. So what we can then do with this data is predict how much an incident will cost, how frequently will it occur, and after how many miles will it occur as well. So we can just use a single formula to calculate this, which is on screen in the bottom left. So we've got claims per million miles. So you've got the number of incidents times a million, and then divide that by the miles driven. So the aim of this is to prioritize resource. So we want to make the best in class decisions, as James has said at the start in our DNA slide. So where can we best allocate our resources? Do we want to spend our time focusing on route planning, or is it better to focus on vehicle technology? Or is our money best spent and resource spent on training our drivers or making sure we've got a really tight and slick induction procedure, for example. So it's basically a slide to say knowledge is power, and if you're not tracking and recording your data, then you won't be able to get any of this, and you won't be able to know where to prioritize in the future. So it's really a starting block to get you thinking. Once you've started to once you've started to track the basic data, so claims and mileage, then you can track further data and metrics, which we'll talk about in later slides. Okay, I'll hand over to James now to talk about the second pillar.
Yep, thank you, Matt. So moving on to management around the drivers in pillar 2. I'm going to start off with FNOL. This is something that we really like to emphasize and bang the drum about. We really like the idea of quick and quality incident reporting. We want all incidences to be reported in as soon as possible, both minor and serious, and particularly if third parties are involved, we want to get in front of that as fast as possible. So just going into the speed and quality, FNOL is obviously the start of that claim cycle. If you report it to us as soon as possible, this is the key almost to reduce claim costs. We can manage them, and we can minimize the opportunity for those third-party costs to rise. So if we go through our ideal situation, we call it the golden hour. So if a claim is reported to us within the first hour of an incident occurring, our claims team can significantly reduce the costs of the claim. We do that by taking control of the third-party claim, minimizing third-party repair and hire costs, solicitor fees, medical fees. And if you go through the timeline, collision, notify us as soon as possible, make sure all the third-party details are there and available for us. We can then take control of the claim, we can decide the liability straight away, and we can manage and minimize those costs. And just to further emphasize the effects of that, I've got a slide here to show what it could look like for any kind of claim, an average claim, if we do not get that first notification. So if we get it in the first 24 hours, an average claim might be around 2.8k. Then if it takes a while to get to us after 7 days, those higher costs can rise, and we can get up to around £10,000. After another week, it could be 12. And then if we don't hear anything for almost a month, then that could rise all the way up to £27,000. So we're looking at like a factor of 10 difference there if you just get the report, if you just get the notification in as soon as possible. To kind of help with that, you might have seen these if you are a Protector client. These should help with the speed and quality of the reporting from the driver. It gives them ease and access to it. They know exactly what to do. It shows them how they can collect all the relevant information required from a third party, and then shows the next steps, what the driver must do to ensure that we can get that data as quickly as possible and start intervening and reducing the claim as fast as possible. So that's the front of the bump card, just to show you all, and on the back. And then for those existing clients that we have on this call, please reach out whenever you need more. We do like to ensure all of our clients are stocked with these. Obviously, ideally, you never need to use them, but for when the need arises, we want to make sure that these are available to you. So then I'm going to move on to the 6 stages of collision. This is kind of something to keep in mind when doing those driver interviews in the investigation process, to understand the potential moment within an incident, within that timeline, to where that went wrong, to help you further identify the root cause of an incident. So the first is the point of possible perception, which is the point where the driver could potentially have seen the need for action. Then we have the second point, which is the point of actual perception. So this is when the driver has recognized they need to do something and they have started to react. The third point is the point of application. This is when evasive action is attempted. This is where they've turned away, or this is when they've applied the brakes. So if the example here is the start of rubber skid marks on the road surface, that is the point at which the driver first used evasive action. Then the fourth point is the point of no escape. This is the point within the timeline of the collision where they could not have avoided the collision given the current set of circumstances. The fifth point is the point of impact, which is the point of the actual collision, and then finally the point of rest, which is what you see on the photo to your left. This is the point at which the vehicle or pedestrian has finally stopped following the collision. So I'm going to hand over to Matt. I want to leave this picture up here just to let everyone look at it. It's going to be another Slido poll, but the question, just to kind of test everyone's perception skills and just like awareness skills, is going to be, what direction was the motorcycle coming from prior to the crash? Just to get your detective juices flowing.
Okay, thanks, James. So yeah, if you study the image, we've got a car and a motorbike that have collided. So the question is, what direction was the motorcycle coming from prior to the crash? So yeah, we've given you a few options, so we'll see what we get. And we did do a practice run yesterday, me and James, and to be honest, I couldn't even bloody think of which way which way the motorbike was coming from, but I do know the right answer today, so yeah, I'll be looking out for it. Okay, I've got a few answers. I'll talk through it. So what was happening is the car was traveling down towards the roundabout as if it was traveling into the laptop or the page. And what it was doing is it was turning right into that junction on the right hand side of the image. Yeah, okay, so the car's heading into the page or the laptop and it's turning right into that junction. The motorbike's actually coming towards us, or it's coming out of the page or the laptop, and it's just going straight ahead. So what's happened is the car's not really seen the motorbike. It started to turn and it's just seen the motorbike at the last moment, and I think, is that the point of no escape, point 4 that we talked about? And the motorbike's flipped over the rear of the car and you can just about see the rear windscreen of the vehicle has been smashed by the motorbike. So I think most of you did put the right answer. Motorbike's coming towards us out of the junction on the right. Oh no, sorry. So the motorbike's actually coming towards us. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to everyone. But I'll move on now just to talk about UK collisions in particular. So we've got some data from Department for Transport. I'll link that to the road safety data as well. Just for UK collisions we're talking about here. So what were the contributing factors for UK collisions in the past year? And when we think about car crashes or car collisions or incidents, the first thing we normally think of is careless driving or a driver speeding. But as we can see from the chart on screen now, the biggest offender is actually failing to look properly. So common examples of this are not being aware of our surroundings while manoeuvring, not looking properly at junctions, and also failure to engage our mirrors when we're changing lanes as well. So we can also have other factors like misjudging speed or the path of vehicles, and distractions also a main cause as well. So just to give you an idea of what the main contributing factors are to UK collisions, and I don't know if that surprises anyone, but we've still got speeding and careless driving up there, but the main cause is actually failing to look properly. And yes, I've just seen a question come in, so reversing is included in this. So you may be aware that reversing and slow speed manoeuvring is the bane of any client or insurer's existence. So yeah, they are included. So maybe minor damage, but they are a highly frequent event. So good question. Okay, so I'll just move on to it's a bit of a case study. So say we've had an accident and there's a police investigation. So let's say me and James, we run a semi-successful haulage business and one of our drivers has been involved in a serious incident on the roads. So I'm just going to talk through what happens next in terms of the police report. So the police will first attend the scene, and they'll be completing a Stats 19 report. So what they'll include in this report are witness statements. So they'll speak to any witnesses that have seen the event. They'll take measurements of vehicles, damage to the highway, damage to the bollards, distances between them, include that in the report. They'll breathalyze any drivers involved, and they'll include those results in the report. And any mobile phones from any drivers in the incident, they'll take those off and do some analysis on the phones to see if they were used prior to the accident or indeed at the time of the accident itself. In addition to this, any vehicles involved will be impounded for analysis, and if there's a fatality at the scene, we may treat the scene as a murder scene. So as well as the site report, the police will undertake a pretty comprehensive review of all relevant documentation at our haulage business, and the point of this is to determine where the fault lies. So have we been at cause of the driver having a collision? So first they'll review any timesheets. So say the drivers have been working overtime, or have they been working double shifts where they shouldn't have, as in our previous case study with John, the van driver, working extra shifts at the warehouse. The next thing they'll look at are driving licenses. So they'll review the driving licenses of the driver in question. So do they have the correct license for the HGV that they've been driving at the time? They'll look at any points or previous bans on that license, and they'll cross-reference this. Next, they'll look at our risk assessments. So were these in place at our organisation? So having a risk assessment is a basic legal requirement to be able to control and identify and mitigate hazards while we're driving at work. So was there an overarching risk assessment present for the driver in question while he's been driving? They'll also review driver assessments, driver training records. So had the driver had any additional driving assessments or training in the past? And if we did undertake these, what risk rating were they given? And what subsequent training were they given as a result of that risk rating? The next thing they'll review is any incident investigation reports. So if the driver had been involved in an incident prior to this incident, was the root cause of that undertaken? And also, is there an accident investigation policy present in our workplace? The next thing they'll check are records of vehicle checks. So looking at a daily vehicle check procedure in place, looking at servicing schedules, maintenance regimes for the vehicle. So was there anything fundamentally wrong with the mechanics of the vehicle? And they'll also, as I say, check witness statements as well. So those who spoke to the driver on the morning of the crash, indications of the behaviour of the driver being stressed, or were they late, or were they tired or fatigued, for example. As we've got on screen now, we've got telematics data. So all of this is really useful to the police. So they'll look at the acceleration, braking, cornering, speeding events for that day and for the previous period of time that that driver's been using the vehicle. And last but not least, they'll look at the overarching policy and procedures. So what they'd want to show ideally, or what we'd want to show the police, is that we've got a really good, robust, overarching safety procedure, and it's backed up by internal policies. So there's no stone left unturned for the police. Okay, I'll hand over now to James to talk about the third pillar of the day.
Thanks, Matt. We're moving on to the investigation of the vehicles. So first I'll go through what kind of things need to be investigated within the vehicle, so such as all of your near misses involving your trucks and third-party vehicles, investigate your own vehicle and property damage, third-party vehicle property damage, investigate the loading and the vehicle stability. Has that led to an incident? The loading security and the strapping, bridge strikes potentially. Has there been an incident of like colliding with the bridge strike? Is the vehicle too big or too small for a certain route? And then vehicle or trailer rollover and rollaways. And then so once the vehicles are inspected, we can start asking the questions. Was the best person and or vehicle selected for the job? Was it a difficult area to maneuver in? Was the vehicle too large for that delivery point? Was the driver just less experienced? Did the driver know about the vulnerable areas of the vehicle as shown in the photo above? Do they know how to avoid damages to those common areas? And then, did the driver conduct a pre-use vehicle check? Did anything crop up? Is there a defect currently live on the vehicle that just hasn't been yet addressed because I haven't had time to take it off the road to address it? Is that going to affect how the vehicle drives, etc., and things like that? So similar to like the driver factors, we're going to be looking at the vehicle factors, and again, maybe things you might be looking out for are tire issues, brake failure. But then if you look at the bottom of that graph, you can see that the most common issue is that there is no vehicle issue, and it is just down to the driver error. But if there are issues with the vehicle, as I said, there's a live defect that hadn't yet been addressed. These are the things to be looking out for when conducting the investigation. These are the common areas. So like when investigating the vehicle factors in collisions, do the visual inspection, check for mechanical failure or damage that could explain the cause of the crash. So worn out brake pads, damaged suspension, etc. Look at the maintenance records, daily checks. As I've said before, defect pointed out but not yet addressed. Has that led to the incident? And then we now have a lot of telematics in a lot of our fleets now, so we're in the modern age. So these can provide insights into speed, braking, acceleration before and during the collision. So for example, can you see if the driver slowed down before an incident or did they not? That just gives you a bit more insight into the frame of mind of the driver during the collision. Might give a little bit of a window in to see if he was distracted, if he just didn't see it at all, he didn't apply the brake, or if he just saw it too late, or and coupled with stuff like dash cams, you can identify if it was tailing or things like that. So it's just about collecting all the information you can to actually find out why the incident might have occurred. And so linking into that, we have the data footprint. Every vehicle that we operate leaves some form of data trail in the forms of what you can see on the screen popping up here on the left now. And the main point is just by using the vehicle data, you can provide those meaningful reports and actions to improve that driver engagement and safety performance behind the wheel. It's kind of just to emphasize the point, this is just to always increase driver safety, health and well-being, reduce road traffic collisions, and you cannot start to make those actions unless you start collecting this data, start doing the analysis, corroborating it with the driver's testimonies, and then once you get all of that, you can start coming up with solutions to help you improve you guys even further in the future. I'll hand over to Matt again for best practices.
Okay, thanks, James. So let's say we have a vehicle in an incident. We want to do an internal investigation. The point of this slide is that following an incident, there's a lot to learn from the vehicle that's been damaged. And in this slide, we're going to share some best practice on how to make the most of your internal investigation. So the first thing we're going to want to do is collect evidence. Most importantly, we need to do this before the vehicle's tampered with to make sure everything's as is at the point of incident. Make sure to photograph the vehicle from different angles to capture all the damage, ideally using a timestamp on your camera. It's important to do this because we need to map the damage caused by an incident on a diagram to aid the investigation process. For example, we can draw conclusions on how the collision occurred by assessing the areas on the vehicle that are damaged. In later investigations, we could compare this to the driver's statement to build a picture of what exactly happened. It's important to assess previous accidents and repairs that may have occurred and consider if any of these link to the current failure or damage to the vehicle. If possible, we always recommend the use of forensic experts to assess issues regarding structural integrity, seatbelt mechanisms, and airbags. So during this process, we think it's really important to be mindful of the end goal of the investigation. So the whole point of the investigation is to be able to identify and implement corrective actions, which is aiming to prevent future incidents. So these could be driver training focused, engaging with vehicle manufacturers to redesign vehicle features, or strengthening maintenance schedules, just to give you an idea of the kind of things we're thinking about. Remember to also check for previous safety recalls that may have been missed and could have contributed to an accident or the incident in question. So now we have another Slido poll. And this time we're talking about slow speed maneuvering. So which of the following statements do you consider most effective in reducing slow speed maneuvering and reversing incidents? So I'll just give you a minute or so to have a think and put your answer in. Just give you another 10 seconds or so. Okay, I'll speak through. So we've got two options on screen. So the first, which most people have gone for, is regular driver coaching focused on situational awareness and safe maneuvering techniques. And the second, with 27% of the share, is installing advanced vehicle technology. So things like reversing cameras or proximity sensors. So it's kind of a trick question because both are really effective. Most effective probably is the one that most of you have selected. So regular driver coaching, focusing on situational awareness and safe maneuvering techniques. That's excellent. That's a really good way in reducing slow speed maneuvering that we've seen. But so is using advanced vehicle technology such as reversing cameras. The problem with vehicle technology is we can't wholly rely on it. So we do need the driver coaching and situational awareness. And if I was to pick one, I'd probably go for that myself, but we do need to see it backed up by cameras and technology as well. So both were kind of right. So everyone's a winner, but the true winner is driver coaching. Okay, I'll just move on to pillar 4, which is everything in this pillar is talking about the journey. So we will have another poll in the following slide, but just to set it up, we're going to be talking about 3 road environments here. So left to right, we've got urban, we've got rural, and we've got motorways. So there's going to be 2 questions. The first of which will be, where do you think the most collisions occur? And the second will be, in which road environment do we think the most fatalities occur? So we'll just flick over to the first question now. So we're talking about the UK. We're talking about the rural environment, the urban environment, and motorway road environment. Where do you think the most bent metal collisions occur? Okay, I'll give you 10, 15 seconds just to pick an option. Okay, thanks everyone for your involvement. That's great. It looks like we've all picked, or most of us have picked urban. All right, that's so I don't forget. Okay, if we could go to the next question. So similar, but which road environment do you think the most fatalities occur? And I'll just give you 10 or 15 seconds. Okay, great. Great involvement. Thanks everyone for putting in an answer. So we had motorways and then rural and then urban at the bottom. Okay, great. So I'll just talk us through the actual answers in the table at the bottom of the screen now. So we're talking about bent metal collisions. So you guys have put the urban road environment, and that's exactly what the data says. So most collisions will occur in an urban environment. The next most likely is rural at 29%, and then only 3% of bent metal collisions occur on the motorway. Fatalities, you had motorway down at the top, followed by rural and then urban. when actual fact, the most fatalities occur on rural road environments, followed by urban, and then motorways at 6%. So I'll just talk through each road environment. So we've got most bent metal collisions occurring in the urban environment because there's a high concentration of vehicles in these environments. We've got a lot of vulnerable road users as well, pedestrians and cyclists. Urban roads can be complex and a bit scary. They've got a high number of junctions, and there's also a high level of distractions as well. So cameras, traffic lights, junctions, bus lanes, a whole host of things to contend with. So that's why most bent metal collisions occur in the urban environment. If we talk about the rural environment, we see that most fatalities occur here. And this is because of the relatively high speeds that occur on rural roads. There's a possibility of narrow, winding roads with blind bends. There's no separation between oncoming traffic. There's still a presence of vulnerable road users. There's always a lack of street lighting, so the roads are badly lit. And there's a possibility on B roads that we may have poorer road surfaces than on urban and motorway roads. Generally, motorways are actually the safest roads in the country because they've got controlled access through junctions, physical barriers separating oncoming traffic. We've got no vulnerable road users. There's similar relative speeds between vehicles, keeps them at bay, and they're generally well designed in terms of visibility, and there's lots of space within vehicle lanes. Okay, so yeah, well done everyone for your answers and contributions. I'll hand over to James to talk about risk factors now.
Yeah, so we won't talk about risk factors on urban roads. Matt alluded to a lot of them in the previous slide, but again, contributing to that 65%, there's some lists of reasons on the right, and it's definitely not an exhaustive list, but things just like more stops, increased exposure to tight parking spaces, blind spots, complicate reversing. Just new drivers may struggle with complex vehicle maneuvers within an urban environment. I know from my experience, I really avoid trying to drive in London. It's just not my cup of tea. I don't like it. It makes me a bit stressed. So just imagine that on a fleet perspective, like every driver might have that thought. Some people might like it, I don't know, but just from my personal experience, and even navigating unknown areas, it always takes me a while to get used to wherever I am when I'm driving. So that's just another increased complication that a driver might be going through when driving around in these urban situations. Looking at environmental factors, so we have stuff like poor junction design, newly or poor design roads, low visibility, poor road surfaces, and it's just things to think about when conducting those investigations and interviews. If there is a lot of pedestrian heavy zones, poor junction design, roadworks, is it possible to potentially route plan around these difficult areas? Can we give drivers notice about common difficulties to help them when they come across them? Things like low visibility or slippery conditions. Is it about, can we provide training for driving in adverse weather? But yeah, as I said, it's just about understanding the full picture and knowing all of the potential factors that could have an effect to identify the real root cause behind the incidences. So with this slide, I'm going to start off with a rhetorical question, and I'm going to ask, when do most people buy burglar alarms? And a lot of the time, most people buy burglar alarms immediately after they've been robbed. And the similar situation with road traffic signs is that the road safety features, speed cameras, only tend to get installed when a number of incidences within that particular piece of road have risen. So if we just look at the first photo and then maybe even try and rewind back maybe 30 years, this might have just been a plain road, no road markings on the road, maybe the crash barriers weren't up, the chevrons, speed cameras and the warning signs, they might not have been there. But as the incidences creep up, more and more of these have been put in place to forewarn drivers that this is a high hazard zone. Be careful. Please kind of acknowledge the road markings and the road signs. And then if we look at the bottom, potentially 30 years in the future from the road at the top, there's non-slip road been put in place, stronger crash barriers, traffic lights have been placed to actually control the flow of traffic. So this is just to kind of highlight that when drivers are seeing a lot of road markings, road safety features, this should be like a trigger to them to understand that this is a high risk junction. I'm just going to leave off to Matt for the best practice and the final pillar of today.
Okay, great. Thanks, James. So we're going to be talking about reporting the investigation, the process itself now. So on to the next slide. First, we'll just bring it back to the aim of the investigation. So if we start thinking about the aim, the purpose, what do we actually want to achieve by conducting this investigation? So the answer to this is we want to be able to pinpoint what went wrong, and we want to be able to know what measures we can put in place to prevent similar incidents from occurring again in the future. So to do this, we need to get the driver's version of events. We need to verify the facts, eventually establish the root cause. And after gathering this information, we're in a pretty good place to be able to make recommendations for future control measures. So that's the whole basics of the investigation. So on screen as well, we've got a interview checklist. So this is a pretty good place to start with your investigation. So what we want to do is investigate first. We want to gather evidence prior to the interview, photographs, telematics data, and you want to be in a good place of knowledge, as much knowledge as you can possibly gain before having that interview with the driver in question. The next step is to prepare well. So having all this preparation, going with an open mind, but a clear goal of what you actually want to achieve. So I've got all this information on the accident, I've got all these photos and the telematics data, but what I really want from this interview is your version of events of the 3 seconds before the collision. Say you've got to really plan the interview and your questions in advance. What do you actually want to get out of this? The third step is to choose an appropriate location. So please try and find a private, distraction-free environment. Just create a really good, focused environment to be able to share knowledge and encourage openness between you and the driver in question. Next step is to engage the driver. So build a rapport, use open-ended questions, let them do the talking, and just encourage a friendly dialogue and free flow of information. And the final step is, if you do have any challenging questions or confrontational questions, then it's probably best to save these for the end of the interview, because if you say these too early, you're probably going to annoy the driver and they're going to close right up. They're going to withhold information. So try and get as much out of the driver. And if you've got something that you know is a bit confrontational, a bit left wing, then maybe save that for the end game. And the point of this is to maintain productivity and uncover maximum information. Okay, and we will have these slides sent out to all our attendees following the presentation. So now just a bit on collision reporting forms. So we'll provide a sample collision reporting form in addition to the slides, as well as the slides. So as the slide says, a specific form for collision reporting will enable the capture of correct information. What we want is a systematic approach to information recording, and we want to be able to provide a method for further analysis where we can identify the patterns, the trends, or the specific areas which we can benefit from corrective actions. So you can use a paper-based collision report form, you can use a digital system, but the important point to remember is to record this data in a consistent and structured way. Something we want to highlight is to never write down uncorroborated information as a fact. Two reasons: one, it's highly immoral, and two, any information of your investigation can be requested by the authorities as evidence, and generally we just don't want to be on the wrong side of the law where we can. So just stick to the facts, plain and simple. Don't assume and don't lie. It's fairly easily, but we just thought we'd make a point of saying it. Okay, so on to causational factors now. So the causational factors, we're going to talk about the 5 whys. And it's just important for me to say the 5 whys, it's not a target, but a minimum. So we use the 5 whys process to identify the root cause. And we want to find the root cause because we want to find the cause of what went wrong so we can implement the control measures to stop it happening again in the future. To get to the root cause, we need to go first through the direct cause, which is the unsafe act or unsafe condition just before the collision. We need to then get to the contributory cause, which is all the factors that contributed to the direct cause of the collision. And then after finding that, we can peel away the onion and get to the root cause, which is the core issue that initiates the entire cause and effect of the collision. So what we'll do is we'll ask the 5 whys, 5 plus whys, we should say. So say we've got a scenario here. There's been a collision with a motorcycle. So we can ask our driver, why was there a collision with a motorcycle? Because the driver didn't see it. Why didn't the driver see it? Because they didn't look properly. Why weren't they looking properly? Because they weren't concentrating. And why weren't they concentrating? Because they were behind schedule. And why were they behind schedule? Because they left the depot late. So we could go even further and say, why did we leave the depot late? And it could be a problem with loading the van or the truck, or, you know, we can keep going and get to the root cause. But in this example, we've stopped at leaving the depot late. So in this case, we may have a direct cause, which is not seeing the motorcycle. Contributory causes, easy for me to say, is not looking properly, can also be not concentrating and being behind schedule. But in this case, the root cause could be leaving the depot late. And we could even dig a bit further to find the actual root cause beyond this. So that's just to give you an idea of the root cause analysis process. I'll just hand over to James to talk about communication.
Thanks, Matt. I'll just get all of these on screen. So this is kind of the soft skills behind conducting the interview and how to get the most out of the interview and the most out of the driver, keeping them conversational and keeping them in that frame of mind and open to be able to give you as much information as you need. So starting off with body language. So use that open, confident body language to reinforce your words. Avoid closed body language, so crossing your arms, crossing your legs. Just keep square to the driver. Make sure that they're as comfortable as possible. Don't shy away and like close yourself off. So as I said, in the moment, sit upright, use hands, gestures, emphasize your points, and that will invite the engagement from the driver. Unfortunately, some of the slides have been cut off at the bottom, but I know them, so that should be fine. We'll go to active listening. Stay fully present, give your full attention to the driver and avoid interrupting them as much as possible. So maintain that eye contact, occasionally summarize to show that you're engaged. So what I'm hearing is XXX, blah, blah, blah. Then we go to seek clarity. So if you're not completely understanding of what they're saying, just ask questions that clarify rather than challenge, to keep that kind of open mindset and that comfortable environment. So the questions you would be asking would be, can you elaborate on what you meant by X, or can you help me understand how this connects to Y, rather than the challenging version of what do you mean by that, or it's keeping the questions open and allowing for the conversation to continue. So be concise, stay focused and to the point. Don't over explain, don't dominate the conversation. This needs to be a driver-led conversation. The more that you speak, the less they can, and the less information that you can obtain from the interview. So in the moment, you would say, To sum up my point, I believe we should focus on X because of Y. Make sure you just keep your contributions brief, but make sure that they are meaningful and help contribute to the conversation. And then finally, it's about when to use the open and closed questions. So at the beginning of the interview, you want to start with those open questions, such as the what's, why's, when's, how's, where's, and who's. So the example there is, tell me what happened the day of the crash or the incident or whatever. That start with a very open question like that. And then once you kind of get a feel and you understand where this might be leading, then you can close up the questions and start and pinpoint the root causes. Something to help with open questions. I know this is quite a difficult thing for a lot of people. People don't like silence, but to utilize the power of that silence is very beneficial in these types of interviews. What you want to do is you want to ask your open question, and if you don't like the silence, a trick that I like to use is you say the open question, just stop, drink some water. That will give you something to do within that silence, take your mind off the silence, but then the silence in the room sits, and hopefully that will get the driver to kind of open up and tell you the information you need to know. So coming to the end of the presentation, but just before we finish, we're going to go through making recommendations. So once you go through the investigation process, you've collected all the data, you've had the driver interview, you know where the root causes are now lying, you can finally make recommendations, and here are some ideal solutions that you might be making at the back of that. So going through kind of different levels of the GDE matrix, just to link it back in, it could be targeted driver training for maneuvering, or it could be a standard operating procedure addressed through your policies and procedures to tackle a specific trend that you might be seeing. You could upgrade your vehicle technologies, backup cameras, improve visibility around the vehicles, give drivers increased situational awareness training, so dynamic risk assessments, maybe looking at levels 2 and 3 of the GDE matrix, and then looking at level 5 might be just ensuring realistic delivery schedules, remove as much pressure as possible from the driver to make sure that they are in the right frame of mind and they're not driving in under undue stress or anything like that. If it's a locational root cause, you might think about doing site-specific risk assessments. So if it's possible, develop a plan to issue two drivers for problematic delivery locations. So basically know all the environment obstacles in that zone. Is it difficult to get in and out of? Is there restricted areas? Is there even just the roads leading up to it? Is it known to be like very parked up on the side of the road, so you have to squeeze through? Things like that. Evaluate the layout of the delivery site. As I said, entry and exit points, any other potential hazards, sharp turns, uneven surfaces. The more the driver knows about a very hazard or high risk site, the more they can be prepared and just comfortable in delivering to that site, for example. Some more recommendations in terms of if it's a parking issue, just raise the awareness of parking and maneuvering best practice, park in well-lit areas, just to help with maneuvering or when returned to the vehicle. Use designated parking spaces to avoid inconvenience others, reduces the chance of your own vehicle get damaged. And then if it's about reversing or maneuvering, use a banks person or spotter if one's available. Always encourage drivers to get out and look and use the acronym GOAL. Maybe a bigger one is just to give that driver the confidence to say, or encourage them to be, if they're not 100% confident in that maneuver, they do not do it and they use one of the above to help them get out of that maneuver. So yeah, thank you for listening to us today. This is the end of the presentation. I'll leave to Matt to talk through the feedback slide.
Yeah, thanks, James. So I'll just post a link to a feedback link. If you could give us some feedback, what we've done well, what we could do better, that would be great. anyone that's leaving now, if you could please try find some time to respond to that feedback link, that would be amazing. And I think now we'll try have a go at a Q&A. I'll just look at the Q&A questions, and me and James will spend a bit of time going through the Q&A right now. But yeah, thanks for getting involved and coming to listen to us today. It's been really good.
And just looking at the chat as well, it's been very good to see that there's been just engagement between the audience members answering kind of their own questions in there as well. So obviously we encourage that. It's all about information sharing. So really happy to see that.
Okay. Great. Yeah, thank you. So I'll just go to the Q&A first. I think Claire Thompson. Oh, has it been answered? Okay. I will leave that one then. I don't need to go to a question that's been answered. Laura Bradley's just asked, anyone interested in experienced best transform? Not for us, sorry. I don't think we've got too many questions. I think most have been answered in the chat. I tell you what, we'll call it a day, but we'll review any questions in the chat and we will get back to you via email, if that sounds like a plan, because I can't see too many questions that haven't been answered. But thank you all for coming, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it.